So I wasn't really missing. I was working and now I'm finally back. I'm happy to be back. Today we will be working with this example. I'm not going to get too specific within the routing, but today I'm going to try and help you keep on training your ear on how to listen for wideness. And that means like how much width does a sound actually have? This is the topic that I talked about in my presentation in Keto. I'm sure it could be interesting. It's a really small version of it. So for this example, I'm using the Simplifier. It's a 0 watt reverb stereo amplifier for guitar players. It's incredible. This is not a paid video or anything, but I bought it and I wanted to play with it. And there was a friend who's a guitar player was kind enough to lend me his skills so we could show this. So the only things that I used for this video are the Simplifier and his pedal board. Those are the only things that I used. The idea here is that you have to think about how things are going to fit, not only tone-wise, just because, but I'm also thinking about how things are spreading from left to right, how I'm using the spectrum and the frequencies available within the track and within the section of the track. First, I'm going to start with something really simple because that's what most guitar players usually do. They hook their pedals and they use all of their own things and they go into the amp, into the guitar cab, and they just record that out with a microphone or a line out. And that's a really narrow sound, even though you're trying to use the stereo output of something like this, and it sounds just like this. The guitar will be loud most of the times because that's the thing that I really want you to appreciate. So this is a stereo sound. It really is a stereo sound, but it's quite narrow because I'm only using the same amp on both sides. It's a Fender style, and I'm not doing much to it. I'm just recording out of the spatial effects pedal board, out of the delays, and that's that. So let me show you how things are in full mono, and then I'm going to open it and you can start appreciating how things spread from left to right and how things start going back and bringing depth into the sound. This is full mono, everything middle. And that's wide-ish, but it's not so wide. So I started getting crazy with how I could route things. So the first thing that I did is I took out the signal from the guitar. I went into the tuner and the compressor, into the overdrive, into the booster. I went into the input of this, and I used the FX loop to go into the FX, the spatial effects, and that brings a different sound because you're going really steady into the FX and it gives you a really consistent spatial sensation, and it sounds like this. And an interesting thing is that even the players started playing differently because they react different to the effects. So they think in another way of their phrasing. I took it a little bit further, and what I did then was from the overdrive, I went into the simplifier, and I went from the simplifier effects loop into the booster, and from the booster into the spatial effects. And it sounds like this. And I want to really point out something that I feel is really different, even though I'm only changing the booster. You can go back and compare them. In the second example, it actually feels like the effects are further behind because they aren't as present, as close to you as this third example, where I'm having the booster feed the spatial effects. And that's because if you have this constant gain going into the effects, you're going to have a really consistent effects section or feeling in the background. But if you actually push harder into the effects, they can express some non-linearities in a different way, and they can actually become much more present because you're feeding a different kind of harmonic content or even saturation into them. And that brings them much closer. I'm not doing any kind of trickery or sleight of hand. So I kept pushing this idea. And then I went with this way of using the left FX loop and driving it back into the simplifier. But the right one went into the spatial effects, and then it went back into the simplifier. And it sounds wider in a different way. But it sounds different, and what I like about this version is that I'm thinking that there I can really place something in the middle, and it's not going to fight with anything because it's so spread apart that it's not going to take space from the center. Another version of it is I started playing with some crazy routing and some really simple tools that you can have in your own studio. And I know it's not ideal, but I have this strange 1:2 outputs. That's for the instrument. And I sometimes use this cable just for that, for splitting signals. I know it's long, I know it's not the best way to do it, but work with what you have. It really doesn't matter if in the end you have really low noise and the music is working. So with that cable, what I did was I took out from the overdrive and I fed one of those copies into the simplifier, and the simplifier had a stereo output that left me with a left and right wet signal because it was full wet, and a completely dry in the middle signal. And I also used the foot pedal, and I was not so used to the feeling of how much to push it so it fits into the effects. That way I can record real time how much of the effects they want to express in different sections, but I'm recording the wet signal in two different channels, and they have control of how much they're inputting, and it has to do with how the effect reacts to the fitting into the effects, if that makes any sense. And that was my bad. So I kept going and I recorded this. That's much better balanced out. But I wanted to show that that's actually me pushing the pedal. And this is much more balanced. And I think that sounds in a different way because I have this really, really nasty guitar tone right in the middle. And this is probably much more of a solo kind of tone because it's actually using the three sides or the three places that you have available within your speakers: your center, your left, and your right. You could also take that idea a bit further and you could actually split again the signal in this version and feed different things into the input of the delays using the same pedal board, but having a split signal in the center. And that sounds like this. And that sounds really clean, really open, and it doesn't sound like two takes, but it sounds really, really wide. Two last versions of this. So you might want to try changing the order of your effects sometimes. So he had two chorus pedals in his pedal board, and I asked him if they both worked. I fed the left chorus into the left input of the delay and the right chorus into the right input of the delay. And that's whitish, but it's not so white. But what if I invert them? What if I fed the left output of the delay into the left chorus and the right output of the delay into the chorus? And it sounds like this. And this has more of a Leslie tone to it. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 versions of how wide can one single instrument be without even having to do new takes, just by creatively routing things. If you might be interested in me making some sort of live stream where you can ask and we can fiddle around with these and other instruments and try to take advantage of this processing idea, let me know in the comments. I'm in Mexico City, so that's my time zone. I could probably do it in the morning. I don't have any problems with that since I know most of the audience actually is more of a morning people. So let me know in the comments. Again, this is something that you can really push. And now, please don't forget that not everything can be stereo, because if everything is white, then nothing is white, because the brain is always comparing left to right, center to left and right. And if everything is really wide open, nothing feels like it's really wide open. If you like this kind of videos, be sure to comment, like, subscribe, and do all of those things that people on YouTube say. My name is Juanchis,